Good morning. Welcome to the mandatory webinar organized by the UK Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Data Protection and WTS Nobisfields. We've been doing this series for a while now. And today we are happy to have the Data Protection take the seat and to give us some education on what we need to know about protecting people's privacy in this country. We have a data protection law, which was passed in 2012. In terms of sensitization, it's not been really out there. So this is an opportunity to learn more about what is expected of companies, those who process data. And the law has defined who qualifies to process data or who's a data processor. So it's a very good opportunity for us to learn. But before I do so, I will introduce myself and I introduce my guest for the day. So I am Theophilus Tawiah. I am a law lecturer, University of Professional Studies Law School. I teach business law, I teach tax law, I teach insurance law, I teach equity and succession, and these are the areas that I research and write about. I'm also managing partner for WTS Nobisfields. It's a law firm and a tax firm with a member of WTS Global with offices in 100 countries or 100 jurisdictions. So we specialize in these law-related subjects, and I think that I'm happy to moderate this event. Today we have Dr. Adonoo, who is a director and a board member of the Data Protection Commission. He's a very knowledgeable person when it comes to data protection, and we are happy to have him here. Dr. Adonoo has a PhD and also has a PhD, and we're happy to have him here to give us an insight in relation to data protection and their work. So his PhD is in global governance and political theory in Shenzhen University in China. He has a master's in public administration in the same university. He originally obtained his degree in land law, land economy from KNUST. And he's a very respected person. He has a certified data protection supervisor under the data protection law. And at the moment, he's also a PENSA international coordinator. PENSA, I guess, is Pentecost Student Association also, if my memory serves me right. So Dr. Adonoo, Dr. Patrick Adonoo, we're happy to have you here. So we'll kickstart with the event, but before that, I want to thank the team from UK Chamber of Commerce, Joba, Sarah, Jocelyn, for the great work in putting this together. We want to thank the ambassador of the Chamber of the UK High Commission for the support and the DIT for the support in this regard. So Doctor, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much, my good friend. And I bring you all greetings from the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission, Ms. Patricia Duse-Poku, and the entire team here. We are very happy to have joined you to bring more light on data protection. All right, so permit me to share my slides. What I'm going to do is that from the organizers of this session, we want to allow the session to be much more interactive. And so I'm going to just present very shortly and then allow for questions that will help us to have a very interactive and a dialogue in time. Now, normally when I'm sharing on data protection or when I'm pushing the awareness of on data protection, I am comfortable using my own understanding of how the KPIs for the measurement of power, of wealth, of worth, and of importance of individuals, families, and nations, how it has migrated over time, and how it has brought us to where we are now and where we are going. Of course, this is my own understanding of how things have run, and I share it in this way. I think it puts in place, it throws more light and it brings perspective to our discussions on data protection. My understanding is that, you see, the amount of power, the amount of control, importance, worth, and wealth of an individual, family, state, nation, company, the measure of that power has changed over time. So my understanding and little research tells me that in the beginning of time, as much as I could find out, the measure of the importance of family, nation, person, company was dependent on how much land that person or that nation held. And so again, I may want to draw attention to, you see, you read old texts and books, and you see that there were all the fight and the big wars, and most of them, the theme and the pivot of all these contentions in time past was land. So people fought for land. Why? Because the measure of their importance, the measure of their power, their worth was dependent on what is the land space they controlled. But the KPI moved and changed over time. Over a few hundreds of years, it changed over time, and it became the KPI, or the importance became people, the amount of people a particular individual, company, family, or nation had control over now determined their worth. Because the reason is that after land had been seen as the main determinant, when you have vast land and you don't have people to till that land, the land is wasted and useless. So now the measure of importance or power that a person held wasn't only dependent, wasn't only dependent on the land, but the people, the amount of people that you had that could till the land. This also reigned for some time, some hundreds of years, until it moved from people, until it moved from land and then to people, and from people to machinery. And so how important or how huge or how strong or how powerful an institution, a company, a person, or a country was determined by how much machinery they were able to produce or they were able to engage. And so histories will tell us about what great people like Mao Zedong and co did just to be able to be part of the Industrial Revolution, and how many people died, all because people wanted to be able to create machineries. And you see, it makes sense, because now the KPI for the development of, for the measurement of the power of an institution, a person, a company, a family, or a nation was not now dependent on land, neither was it dependent on people, but machineries. Because if you had machines, then you don't need so many people to even work. If you had machines, then work goes on this land that you had. And then with time, those KPIs change from machinery to technology. So technology became key, and how much control you had, or how powerful you are as a person, a family, a country, a company, was dependent on how much technology you had. So now it did not matter how small or big your nation was. Look at a nation like Israel, so small, they may not even have arable lands, but once they were technologically inclined, and they could and technology-wise they were strong, then it meant that they were able to, their power and their stakes in this world was huge. Now over time, it is moving from technology, or there is a build-up from technology to data. And so we are entering, or let me even say we've entered into a space and time where how powerful a person, a family, a company, and a nation is. It's not only dependent on how much land they had, how many people they had, or how much industry, machineries they are able to produce, not even how much technology they had, but actually how much data they are able to access, analyze, and control. So data has become, and that is this time, that is the time in which we are. A company's importance, their strength, their power is dependent on how much data and how much information they have. If you're a company owner here, or you're a business owner, you will understand. And if you don't understand, respectfully, I want to submit to you that your business thrives as much as you have information or data. Specific data concerning that particular business. And if you don't have any data at all concerning that particular business, the rest assured that you're not going to go far with that business. So data has become, we were in a meeting with some of our counterparts from Europe, and then they told us that very interesting, was impossible, was quite on the lighter side. But I thought that it's very important to note that is that for them now, data is not just the new diamond. No, but the data is the new air. So data now controls every single facet of our lives and businesses. And it is a known knowledge that the amount of data a person has or controls about you, a person accesses about you, determines the amount of control they have over you. So Theophilus is my friend. And if I knew what's hidden, this just in passing. So if I knew what hidden sicknesses or diseases Theophilus is battling with, if I knew what his financial stakes are, how many banks, maybe how much money he has stacked in the bank, or how much he owes the bank and all that, and which loans he's financing, and if I knew what happened between himself and his wife and his children and all this, where he stays and the risks and all that, it automatically grants me an amount of control over him, just because of the amount of information I have concerning him. So information is key. Personal information is key in every single aspect of our life today. And so therefore, the government of Ghana, just like many other institutions, nations and governments, has seen the need to protect or to incorporate or establish some regulation around the life cycle of people's personal data. Every one of us on this line will accept that there is some form of data of yourself, some personal information of yourself that you consider private, and you would not unnecessarily want to share. Now, it is your right. It is your right for that data to be kept private if you consider it private. And hence, data protection has become a fundamental human right. So the Data Protection Commission, is the institution or the body that the government of Ghana has put together or has established under law to regulate the life cycle of people's personal data as long as they are in this country. The commission was born by the Data Protection Act 2012, the Act 843. And so it is the commission that gave birth to the act. The act that gave birth to the commission. I'm sorry about that. And the commission's duty is to regulate, the life process. I'm talking about the acquisition, the keeping, the collection, the analysis of it, and then the discarding of people's personal data. Now, again, like I said, I want to engage in just about 30 minutes, a very high-level overview. And then after that, because we want it to be a very interactive session. And then after that, I will allow for all questions. And as you ask the questions, I'm sure that the slides that I have will answer some of the questions. So I'm going to just give a very high-level overview, and then we go into it. Now, in the data protection, so I've explained to you that the commission, the Data Protection Commission, is an independent statutory body established under the Data Protection Act to protect the privacy of individuals and the personal data by regulating the processes of personal information. And so that is the responsibility of the data protection. We will regulate the processes around people's personal information. It is key. It is important. It is important that our personal data, our personal information are protected. And then the institution that has been mandated to do that is the Data Protection Commission. Now, before I go to the principles, which I think will answer the questions, let me touch base real quick on some very key terms. Understanding these key terms plays a major role in a person's work in the entire privacy journey. Now, the Data Protection Commission specifically deals with three entities. The first entity we deal with is called the data controller. Actually, all of them, it's not in any order of importance, but we deal with the data controller, the data processor, and then we also deal with the data subject. So if you put together all our work, a high-level summary will be that we deal with the data controller, the data processor, and the data subject. But who is the data controller? There are a couple of other terms that I'll bring in as I discuss. So I'm talking about the data controller, the data processor, and the data subject. There is also a term called consent. And then we have another term called processing. Now, so the data controller, according to our law, is a person, an institution, an organization, a company, or any entity that collects personal data of individuals. 1, 2, and determines the use of that personal data. So the data controller is any individual that collects, any individual, entity, institution, company, whoever, that collects personal data and now determines the use, it determines the actual use of the data that has been collected. Oftentimes, I have people come to my office and they say, "Oh, we did not know about data protection." I mean, of course, our business is not. We are not an IT firm. We don't deal with, we don't do IT or we don't do data. Some people have very interesting understanding about this whole data thing. In Ghana, I don't know how many of you are listening to us from UK, but in Ghana, when we say data, the same word is used for internet bundles, by the TCs, and so the telecommunication companies, when they sell internet bundles here in Ghana, it is called data. So many people think that the Data Protection Commission is responsible for the internet bundle that they've bought. And so if their internet bundle finishes pretty quick, they think, "Oh, somebody's stealing my data." So the Data Protection Commission is supposed to chase after these telecommunication companies to get me back my data. No, that's not it. The Data Protection Commission, this data we are talking about is personal data, people's personal information, their personal data. And now the data controller is the individual, the person, the company that collects that personal data and now determines the use of the personal data. So the person, the entity must not necessarily be an IT firm to be a controller. Churches, religious bodies, para-religious bodies collect data. Maybe when they collect data, they want to find out how many male or female are in our church or this and that and that. Now, that determining the use of that data makes that person, the collection of the data, the determination of the use of that data makes them a data controller. The person, it could just be a company that has 2 people collected a data of an employee, just 1 employee. It still makes that company a data controller. It could be a law firm. It could be an enterprise. It could be a company. It could be. So as soon as a person, an entity, a company collects data and determines the use of that data, now that personal data, the person becomes a data controller. Now, what is personal data? Personal data is every data that identifies a living being according to the Data Protection Act. Personal data is any data or any information that is used to identify, a living being. So your name, your age, your marital status, your sexual orientation, your location, your picture, you can name it. They all form personal data. So the data controller collects personal data from somebody. And so that leads me to the second term that I want to talk about. That is the data processor. Now you see that sometimes some entities have very interesting or very huge business focus, and they collect very huge data. Let's say the NIA, National Identification Authority, they were collecting data. They have 15 million data that they collected. Now, their main focus is to collect data, of Ghanaians. But analyzing the data and processing the data may not be their primary focus and function. So more often than not, the data controller, because of their primary focus, might employ a third party or a second party, let me put it like that, a second party whose job normally is to process or to analyze the data that has been collected by the controller. So you see that this second party has access to all the data, but he did not collect it. He does not determine the use of it. All he does is to analyze it and to bring meaning to it for the person who collected it. That entity, that person, that company is called the data processor. So we have the data controller, we have the data processor, and now I'm going to talk about the data subject. The data subject is the individual or the entity from whom data is collected and processed. So you can understand that all of us here are data, we are data subjects. And whether we knew it or not, we have shared our personal data with some controller. It could be the bank, it could be the hospital, it could be your company, it could be the church, it could be your mosque, it could be anything or any institution. And so I've shared the data controller, the data processor, the data subject, and I've shared what is personal data. But in the collection and the processing of personal data, there is a fundamental legitimacy. The fundamental legitimacy that gives a data controller, a company, an institution, an entity, the right to process a data subject's personal data is consent or by law. So the only reason why, or the only time where a person can process your data, or if you're a company, the only reason, the only time why you can process somebody's data is when they've given you consent, or when you have some form of indemnity by the law to process data. So the data, what I'm trying to say is that the data controller needs the consent of the data subject in order to process his or her personal data. There is the need for consent. What is processing? Processing is any activity that the personal data of an individual goes through in order to generate meaning of the data. One of the very interesting, simple, and often underestimated way of processing data, which many people do, is by viewing. Viewing is part of data processing. So that is why we from the Data Protection Commission, we say that it's so important that data controllers understand the perspective of the. You see, as I talk to you, if per any means, now you know my name. So let's say you go to a hospital and you go and see my name on a sheet of paper lying somewhere that that has my medical record, and then you found something written in it that, let me just say, this is just an example. Let's say you went to see that I have AIDS, God forbid, but I have AIDS. The truth of the matter is that it has a way, my personal information that you have processed has a way that it will influence your relationship with me. Why? Because you have processed my personal data. In that same way, if you went to my bankers and just by chance or per any means, you realize that I have billions of dollars in my account, you'll be surprised. It will have a way that it will influence the behavior of many towards me. So processing, so I've explained data controller, I've spoken about data processor, I've discussed the data subject, and I've talked about consent while talking also about what is personal data and processing. This is very key. It's very important. I'm taking my time to explain to you because it's so important. You need to get it. Now, the data controller, you must know whether you as an entity here, as an individual or as a company, whether you are a data controller or a data processor or a data subject, whether you have consent to what you are using it for, what the data you are processing, and what is processing, and then what is personal data. There are some principles of data protection. We are saying that these are the principles that every institution must bear in mind and must use when they process people's personal data. Now, many data controllers or many people who have, for instance, the Data Protection Commission is a data controller by ourselves, because we take institutions, at least we take personal data of our employees. And so even though we are commissioned, but we are data controllers ourselves, and within it, there are data subjects. So my point is that you may be working for an institution or you are a company or something like that. But the point is that just as you are a data controller, on the flip side, you are also a data subject to somebody else. Hence, when all of us endeavor to do the right thing with people's personal data, then we'll understand that we are on track, to create a very hygienic data protection ecosystem, and that will be helpful for us. Very, 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 very easily, it is very easy to jump into things that are happening now. I use this example a lot. I'm saying that now, or I do say that now, we are experiencing a pandemic. And we are seeing that the pandemic is gradually, dissipating off gradually. But at least in this time of the pandemic, there are nose masks that we can use to protect us. There are running water that we can use to wash our hands. But as a people and as a nation and as companies, if we don't take care, we will be building very weak frameworks, about this big. Now in Ghana, there is big data being collected. NIA collects data of 15 million Ghanaians. Now we just had the national census, the statistics board collects census data, big data, and so many other very big data that has been taken. And as a nation and as a people, it is important that we start realizing the importance of protecting the data we are picking, whether we are a small entity, we are a company or not. We must understand why the need for us to protect this big data or small data that we are picking, or else we will enter into a time that is called infodemics. And just as we have nose masks to protect our faces and to protect our nose from the pandemic, for infodemics, we may not be able. Now, here in Ghana, it's very easy. I think that there are people on this line who may have experienced what I'm going to talk about. You'll be there and you receive text messages from, betting companies and from loan sharks who are just chasing after everybody. Come for loan. But you clearly, or come and do this betting, or National Lottery Authority, or all these people just come and stake lotto or do this or do that. The unsubscribed text messages. Now, it is only a symptom of a much more and a deeper brooding situation. Why do I say that? The issue is that when there is none of us who goes around writing their phone numbers on walls, respectfully, we don't do that. So anywhere we have actually left our phone numbers, what we did was that personal data of ours, which is phone number, normally will come with other things like our names, maybe your bank account, or where you live, or something like that. So the question is, if somebody is sending you information with your number and say come for loan or do this, the next question you want to ask is, what other information does that entity or that person have about you? Where did they get it from? And what could be the possible breaches and the gaps within the facets of data, personal data and data protection in this country, and of course in this sub-Saharan region at large. So you are necessarily you are part, or you could be part, and that is why we need to understand these principles and work with these principles and as individuals, entities, and as companies and as institutions. One, The first principle, not in any order of importance, but the first one I want to talk about is the specification of purpose. The Data Protection Act and its operational principles or the working principles stipulates that when any entity or institution starts to collect personal data, that entity or institution should be very clear and must have a very specific purpose for the collection of the data. So if you are collecting anybody's personal data as an institution or as an entity or as a company or as a person, you must have very, very clear, you must have a clear purpose for the data collection. You must have it. There must be a very clear reason why you are collecting the data. If you're a hospital, then you are collecting the data for medical purposes. And it is it. It must be clear. It is a principle for the processing of personal data. It must be clear. Why are you collecting people's personal data? And so if you're a data subject, okay, you might be here joining in as a data subject. Everybody at the sound of my voice is a data subject because you give your personal data to some entity, at least, even if it's a bank or it's a hospital, you have become a data subject. So one way or the other, everybody here is a data subject. And so specification of purpose is important both for the data controller and the data subject. As I said earlier on, the Data Protection Commission regulates the data controller and the data processor and educates the data subject so that the commission brings all these bodies together in harmony to create a homogeneous and a very clean data protection ecosystem. So as we mandate the data controller to have a clear specification of purpose for the collection or the processing of people's personal data, we also educate the data subject to insist on knowing the purpose specifically of the collection of the data that is coming from them. So in other words, you cannot just go on the street and anybody meets you and they say, please, can you give me a phone number? Can you give, and then you just give it. It's wrong. You are aiding and abetting something wrong. So specification of purpose. 2, compatibility of further processing with the purpose of collection. Now, the meaning of this principle is that when you are a bank, or if you are a bank or a company, that let's say you're a hotel, and you collect data for, let's say the purposes, or let me just say you are a hospital. So for the purpose of medical records keeping, then whenever you want to use the data that you've collected for another thing, ask yourself, is what the new processing of this data, the new use of this data, is it compatible with why I earlier on collected the data? Is the new processing use or the new processing intent compatible with the earlier collection intent? In other words, if somebody gave you their personal data for the purposes of medical record keeping, and later they see that that data they gave you has now been used to sell a product or as a marketing target for the sales of pillows or food, is it compatible? Is it right? Is it lawful? Is it okay? And you and I both will understand that no. If I collected your personal data and I said I was collecting it for the purposes of medical record keeping and all that, and later, let's say that I sell the data, or I just, let's say I have a hospital and I also run hotels. So when I built my hospital, you came in, you give your data, you shared your contact, and then the other time I send you pictures and all the information about my hotel because I have your information. Is it compatible? If it is not, then it's not right. So I've spoken about specification of purpose. I've spoken about compatibility of further processing with the purpose, the original intent and the original purpose of the collection and the processing of data. The third principle that I want to talk about is data subject participation. Data subject participation. The law and the practice of data protection allows for the data subject to participate in the life cycle of his personal data. It is important that data controllers, and I'm talking about companies and institutions and entities and persons who collect some form of personal data for one reason or the other. It is important that after they have clearly stated the purpose for the collection, and they are even consistent with further processing and all that, it is important for them to also note that the data subject must be allowed to participate in the entire life cycle of their data. What does that mean? It means that the systems and the structures that have been put in place for the processing and the keeping, of people's personal data must grant them, they have the right to participate in the life cycle of their data. For instance, let's say that there is a young lady who joined the company and as an employee, and when they joined the company, they gave their name, and their name was Adwoa Mensah, and so they went to marry a few years after, and their surname changed from Adwoa Mensah, and it became Adwoa Efriye. It is their right. They have the right to be given the opportunity to change the name that they've given. The data that they have with you, there must be systems that allows them to change or to change their names that have changed. They have the right to change it. It could be in person. Your HR systems may have to set up policies that allow for such a person to come back for their docket and change their name. Or if it's an online system, the system should allow for people to be able to make alterations, of course, with proper backings and all that, make alterations to the information or the data they've been able to submit to you. It is their right. And data controllers must understand that. Now, a few others that I will have. So that the systems leads me to the next principle, that is data security safeguards. It's important that the data controller will put appropriate and adequate security safeguards around the personal data of data subjects that they have taken. It is the responsibility of the data subject to protect the data it's the responsibility of the data controller to protect the data they have received from the data subject. It is the responsibility of the data controller. So if you are running a very analog system and you keep files and papers, then it is your responsibility to keep them in a locker and lock it. If you keep a digital system, it's your responsibility to employ all the necessary software systems that will protect people's personal data that they've given to you. And here, the most important thing that I want to bring to your view is that it is the responsibility of the data subject, the data controller, to protect, to put adequate and appropriate, underlined, italicized, and boldened, adequate and appropriate data security safeguards systems in place for the protection of the personal data that has been handed over to them. It is your responsibility as a data controller. And the entire system must be open. There is no need for there to be a secrecy about keeping anybody's personal data they have given to you. The system must be open. And so that next principle is called the principle of openness. I've spoken about the principle of the specification of purpose, the compatibility of further processing with with the purpose of collection. I've spoken about data subject participation. I've spoken about data security safeguards. I've spoken about openness. Now, I'm talking about the quality of information. The quality of information. It is also important to note that data controllers are responsible for the keeping of quality information. Quality information. For instance, right now, I am presenting, I'm presenting to you. So if anybody came here and they were a news reporter or something, and then they wrote about me that I was here singing, it's an information. I was actually years old. Patrick was on the webinar singing to the people. Yes, Patrick was on the webinar. It is true. He was there at this exact time. Let's say that the time is 11:16. Yes, that was true, but he wasn't singing. He was presenting. Now, so a good amount of what was reported could be true, but it is not quality enough. The data is not quality enough. It's not quality enough. It's not quality enough. That this principle ties in a lot with data subject participation. So if you take a person's personal data and then they are in your system, and then the people let's say by the time their data got into your system, they were juveniles. They were below the age of 18, and so they needed parental guidance. Now, to keep that data for the next 10 years and still see, or for your system to still process that person after 10 years, when the person has actually become an adult by law, for a system to still consider them as juveniles, you have data about them, all right. You took the right data from the beginning, all right. But as of now, your data is not quality. So the kind of information you keep is not quality. And how this can easily be solved is by creating space for the data subject to participate in the life cycle of their personal data with you. So that when they participate, then you know that there is a filtering of the personal data you are keeping, so that the data you hold about your clients and about your customers and about your data subject, they are quality data enough. The data is up to date. So the names of people the names that have changed because people got married has been captured. People's location data, where they stayed, where they lived, their addresses, they have been changed in the system, and that has also been captured. And you see, this is something that in our part of the world, many people don't pay attention to. So there is a person is entering into a job or a business or something, and then they fill a form, and that is the only form that is kept there for 10 years. Meanwhile, they might have changed places, they might have changed location, they might have changed names, things have happened. They may have given birth, so the next in line for inheritance, or they have a name they call them. Sorry, I've forgotten that one. But the next in line for inheritance, maybe they have children now. Perhaps when they were feeling they were young men and young ladies and they don't have children, so they use their parents. You see, there is a need for quality data. The data must be up to date, it must be accurate, it must be complete. The data must be up to date, it must be accurate, it must be complete. And that is the only time the data you keep is considered as quality data. The data you keep must be up to date, the data must be accurate, and it must be complete. Sylvia, thank you very much. I saw that now, and it's been helpful. The data must be up to date, it must be accurate, it must be complete. And that is when it is it is quality information, quality data. Now, all the things that are done must be done. The last but one principle that I want to talk about is the principle of accountability. The principle of accountability. Now, in how I explain it normally, when a data controller is able to implement all the major or all the principles of data protection, the person or the data controller or that institution will now be seen as an accountable data controller. An accountable data controller. It means that they keep quality information. Their systems are open. They are appropriate data security safeguard systems. There is a room for data subject participation. The data they collect, they don't collect data for medical purposes and tomorrow they start sending you information about pillows and come and buy houses. No. Whenever they are using data, it is compatible with the first reason why they collected, the first purpose for the collection. And if they have to change, they will seek for the consent. They will find a way to get the consent of the data subject before they process that data for another reason. And now the data they take is there is a specification of purpose to the data they are taking. When these things are done, plus the last one that I'll talk about, then we'll say that your institution is accountable. You have accountable data protection systems. Now, perhaps I should have taken this one before I spoke about accountability, and that is the fact that you must have the lawfulness to process. So the next principle is the lawfulness of process. Why are you processing people's personal data? Why? I mean, it must come to mind. You must ask yourself, why are you processing people's personal data? Do you have the right to process personal data? What are the rights? Have you been given the right by any law? Or do you have the consent of the individuals whose data you are processing? These are the determinants of the lawfulness of processing. One, do you have a law that backs you to process that data? Okay. And two, has the data subject giving you consent to process their personal data? It is so important that data controllers know that there is a law. You are processing your data based on law. You are processing your data based on consent. Law of anything that binds, you and the controller. So by law, it could be some agreement signed, it could be some legislation, it could be some form of contract, something that binds you, and for that reason, you have the mandate or you have the right to process their personal data, or you might have gotten clear consent. So is it by law? By law, but I mean to say that, do you have any legal material binding you? Is there any contract? Is there any lease? Is there any official properly documented discussion between yourself and the data subject, or their consent before your process? So when we are able to put all the systems in place, we are becoming accountable, and it is the rights, or it is demanded of the data controller to show proof of accountability and to demonstrate it. So these are things that we must know as data controllers. And it's also very important that data subjects know these things. Now, so as I shared with you, the principles that governs data protection. Now, there are some rights that the data subject has. I mean, there are a few other slides, but because of time, I may end after this slide so that I allow for questions. I believe that as we ask questions and as we go on, when the questions come in, it will suffice. The answers will push into those slides that I have. So on your screen now are the various rights that data subject. Who is the data subject? I've explained earlier on. Person from whom a living person from whom personal data is taken. Now, so what are the rights of the data subject? One, data subjects, you and I, have the right to be informed. You have the right to be informed about the processing of your personal data. You have the right to be informed. It is your right to be informed. So when you go somewhere and somebody is taking your personal data, it is not some act of you're not being inquisitive, asking, why are you taking my data? What is the reason why you are taking my personal data? So the data subject has the right to be informed. The data subject has the right to be informed. Two, the data subject has the right to give and withdraw consent. So after you inform the data subject of processing or taking and processing their personal data, they have the right to give you their consent, or they have the right to withdraw their consent. And so data controllers must know that they have the right to give consent and they also have the right to withdraw consent. It's important. All right. The next is that the data subject has the right to access, the rights to access to personal information. I think I explained it earlier on when I was talking about one of the principles, that is data subject participation, is a right of the personal, the data subject. This personal, this data subjects have the right, to have access to their personal information. So if you are a data controller here, and your systems does not give the data subject the right to be part to participate in their data subject, in their data, and their data lifecycle, it's a challenge. 2, the data subject has the right to amend or to bring rectifications to the data they have given you. And I've spoken about that as well. If a person has a reason to prove that, or they have a reason, and the fact is that their data has changed over time, they have the right to get into your system and to change it. 2, they have the right to object. They have the right to object to the processing of their personal data in one way or the other. In one way or the other, they have the right to object. The data subject can say that I don't agree for my data to be changed or to be processed in this way. Again, the data subject has the right to prevent processing. I think that ties in pretty much with the objector. Now, the data subjects have the right to freedoms from automated decision making, and I spoke about that as well. For instance, with many of the apps and some of the free downloads online, you'll be required to put in your email address. Many of the times we don't read the terms and the conditions, the T&Cs, and so there are a lot of them, and in there somewhere sometimes we agree actually without even knowing that, oh, present, you can market, you can use my email for subsequent marketing. So you start receiving emails from different companies and all that. Now, most of the times it happens because we give access, but the data subject still has the right and the freedoms, to be free from automated decision making. So when these emails are coming, there is the need for wherever you signed off to, for them to give you the opportunity to unsubscribe to such kind of emails. That is a right of the data subject to unsubscribe from, recurrent emails or recurrent texts or automated decision makings. The next is that the data subject has the right to prevent processing of personal data for direct marketing. So like I spoke about, loan sharks, loan companies, texting people here and there, come for loan, I can give you this amount of money. No, the data subject must, and they have the right to say that I don't want to be receiving these messages again. Now, interestingly, the data subject also has the right to complain. Complain to who? Complain to the Data Protection Commission. And let me take this platform to say that a good number of, Ghana is waking up to the essence of data protection and coming to bear with the Data Protection Commission. The commission itself is fairly young, and so gradually, we are very grateful for such opportunities that grants us the room to share and to educate data subjects that they have the right to complain. They have the right to complain to the commission when they have a reason to think that their personal data has been breached. And then they have the right to compensation. I think this is where most data subjects want to hear, that data subjects have the rights to compensation. If the data subject is able to prove that the sending or the processing of their personal data in one way or the other has injuriously affected them, of course, beyond any reasonable doubt, they have the right to compensation. I would want to end my presentation here because we have stated that we want to have a very interactive session. Thank you very much, Theo.